Yeah, bonjour, Mino Dash, and Magano, Canadian Bijikin Station Kaza, Makakin, so the damn thing I got this with day, Lanape, Nishnabe, and down, Mino Dash, Na, Hin Donji. Yeah, me, Ma, Dian, Nongom, Winnipeg on gay, get Abe, Bibun, Ayamagata, with Jing, Eshe Kisana. So, yeah, thank you for the introduction. That is all of some of what I do. But greetings again. My name is Jason Parenteau, and I am here in Winnipeg to share a little bit of what we've learned over the years. And again, it's still winter out here, so as you're talking about your series, I think it is great, and it's really common amongst our people in the winter time is when we share stories. In particular, amongst Anishinaabe, it's common practice that we would share stories about original man. Wenabojou and his things that he did this, during this time, and that's kind of the common practice that's happened. Not always, but it's kind of that time, when we say tell legends, it's okay, like legends, but that's the word. So if you hear someone say that's okay, it means someone's telling a legend. That's okay when means it's a legend, but sometimes it's just that means it's just sometimes it's just it's like things that are we know as our great uncle Wenabojou did. And so being a young person, I don't know if I'm still young, but not according to my children or my niece and nephews. However, mine, I'm still young, and being guided by elders over the years and listening to them, tell stories and things like that about our teachings, about who we are as a people, Indigenous people, and throughout the lands, just want to acknowledge that there's many stories, and of course, many variations, and always got to make sure that we have respect for people, the way they heard things or came across things, and there's many ways to share these things. And so it's interesting in this time that we're using this format. So again, part of my research, I would call, back in the day, I spent lots of time in the library. And so it's interesting today, I'm still in a library. But when you're younger, before the internet was the way it was, or the way it is now, it was common to spend time with elders, and they would share things with you. Well, at least with me. So my other cousins too, but I just happened to retain some things, just by being there and helping out, I guess you could say. And so along with that, having a skill and having a level of respect when older people are talking and sharing things is really important, I think. And how I've experienced things and what they've shared, even to this day, as I just live my life, I see a lot of truth in what was shared to me or with me, and for certain things too. So when we're talking about stories, I think they play a valuable role in the development of a person. And then we're kind of talking in the bigger picture of different stages of life as well. So being a father and an uncle, brother, these, and being a son as well, it changes and the story remains the same, but looking at the story the way I would look at it now is probably different than when I was in my early 20s, I guess you could say. Partially because I remember lots when I was younger. I think that happens. So, and then for children, and hearing these things, I think is really critical when they're young. And then when we look back in our common practice, again, we're reminded of these things in so many different ways, and there's so many different things to do. Like there's so many we can name, but from our traditional point of view, having a child in their moss bag or tiknoggin, having them present at almost everything, which is really important. because that's how they learn. Kinawabe is how they say, is like they watch by learning, or they learn by seeing things, you know. But at the same time, they hear things, you know. And so it's not saying everyone may be the awesomest storyteller, but you know, some are really good. And there's different times that people do it depending on the area. So, for example, in communities that still have the maple sugar camps, that's kind of a good time where people would tell their stories and really, I don't know how to say it, dress it up, I guess you could say. So it takes some creativity, which I think is really amazing, because it's a challenge, you know, and to be engaging, it takes a lot of skill to do that and to be that. And you imagine, you know, nowadays, in comparison to today, children or young people and just people in general are conditioned to have so much entertainment nowadays. So, and how we do it is by our devices and things like that nowadays. But, you know, growing up without those luxury items, then, you know, we learn to listen to how people talk, and then our imagination, you know, which is our creative mind or process, can envision things. And so that's where kind of the importance of language helps us too. And these stories is also to envision what's being shared with us. So you kind of see it in your mind. And we still see this today, like some of our elders, we talk to them, they might be like this, but they're envisioning what you're sharing with them. You know, it's not that they're sleeping all the time, okay? Because I do that too. If I'm just listening and hear the story, I'm paying attention, but I'm kind of just trying to see what it is that people are saying, like assessing the situation, you know? And so for myself, again, learning about things, we've been able to hear different stories and we hold on to them, but also researching some of the forgotten ones. As we know, documentation is very, very important. And today we'll share one story that I read, but I really can't, you know, it's really interesting because there was a real push in the early mid 1900s, I believe, about documenting some of our oral histories. So looking actually in a dictionary, not dictionary, in a library, and you find these tales of our tribes. And, you know, some of these things back then weren't very popular, I guess you could say, just with the general public. So with business being the way it was, they didn't republish some of those books and findings. And some of our own community grassroots organizations did record them and publish them. But I've came across one, and I've never seen this story again, but I know it's interesting because to hear this story we'll share later, I've not seen it again written, and I still look for it. And I always still try to look for that story, because I always want to cite who wrote it, because maybe their grandchildren or great grandchildren at this time might want to hear that or know that about their relative. So some things they're within families and communities, but again, seeing that even in the research is really good, like as far as being in library, finding these old books, but even to have that, and this is true for language as well, looking at that, you know, because we go online, we go on dictionary, we try to learn these words and how they're said, but it's still good to, I don't know how to explain, like check with a living source, I guess you could say, you know, to see if they've heard something like that. And it's really common that you'll hear that is like, oh yeah, I've heard something like that before, and they'll remember, and maybe they'll have something to add on to it, you know. And it's not to be like in a disrespectful way or anything, but it just enriches that. And then also it's satisfying to know that, okay, yeah, this is something that our people did, because that's also what we're looking at in some of the researches, what's authentic as far as stories and what's up for interpretation, you know, especially in the earlier days, because there's a lot of stuff that people write who may not even have been Indigenous, but yet want to hold on to our stories, you know. So that's my kind of process and what I've been through and looking at and researching these things. But again, at my younger age, I did, you know, going back to the younger mind of myself. So I'm kind of going back in time, maybe 20 some years ago. I just thought it was really cool to read these things. not really knowing that, I never expected to be, who I am today, and a father of 3, and how significant that those stories are for my children, I guess you could say it, but that's really what it is, and same for my nieces and nephews. So I think they're really significant. Searching within the family, I think there's a lot of truth in some of our original stories, and some are really localized to the area in which our communities live. So whenever I go visit communities, it's interesting when people from the community host. Like, I'm always a guest. Like, say if I go to a different community, I'm a guest. I'm not going to go run around in the area or reserve or wherever they hunt or something like that. Just kind of know there's knowledge there from the people in the community who live there that you don't go and do for certain reasons that they've been told. So we kind of follow protocol that way, So I don't want to be. Well, it's a level of respect, but it's also learning and hearing the story of why. Because there's things, you got to have a reason why. And it's like, oh, after you hear it, oh yeah, that makes sense. And some of the elders go, oh, uh-huh. So you pick up little sayings too, right? And habits. And that's also from the storytelling, which is something we try to not change as well, try and maintain the same as possible, However, I would say it is a challenge nowadays because we do speak English, but we still try to use our languages as much as possible. So I'd encourage people, and they're learning these stories, find words. If it's a word here and there, then that's fine, and gradually build it up. And that's something. It's a process of work, and then it is for what it is. Whatever people, how they might carry or interpret it is for them what it is for them. We can't control that, but I know what it means to me, and some of these stories are very special. And as I get older, I realize the significance of why they are the way they are, and how they basically have given me, good guidelines, some good reasoning, and safety, and been able to enjoy, I would say, the good things in life, and be able to do my best to live life the fullest. So I think those are some points, like, about storytelling and our legends, I guess you would say too, but really furthering and deepening the understanding of who we are as Indigenous people from communities. So it's not to disclaim original man and titles and things like that, but each of them are very, very special, and do provide us a very good understanding, and keeps us motivated too, because and we're talking about relationships as well with the animals. So how is it that original man interacted with animals? So I think those things are really critical, and we're reminded when you hear the stories, we're reminded constantly, like, about our role in creation, and their voice is really important to recognize of creation. For example, the birds that will come and remind us about things, So I don't know if you have any questions about that so far, but that kind of opening for now.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. Even the approach to learning, and having that opportunity for kids to be connecting with the elders, and to be able to hear the stories, and also just to be able to use their imagination and their mind. I love that. I love that time, and that sharing that you have, and even just the pattern. Like, I noticed that with my cuckoo, she wouldn't tell stories until you were settled. Like, she would settle herself, and then she'd wait, and she wouldn't talk until it was calm. And then she'd start. But it just, the rhythm and the pace and the feeling around being with her and listening to her is something that I carry with me. And it's carried me through so much of my life and the challenges that I've faced, just the time that I've spent, even if it's the same story. I might have heard the same story like 10, 20 times, but it's still, I listened like it was the first time. And I made my sounds the way that it was the first. Oh, oh. But, it was a familiar pattern that I loved and that I carry with me. So, miigwech for sharing about stories and about what they mean to you and about how you look. I think that's encouraging to people too. How do you connect with these stories? I know with my grandmother, she said that she fell asleep all the time. She didn't know any of the endings of the stories. She just knew the beginnings when she was little. And so for her, finding books that had those stories in them was just a real gift. So it speaks to how much the library means to us at the center, and to actually sit with you and to sit with people throughout. It's a gift of this time, COVID time, to be able to do that online as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that, and it's common. Want to acknowledge your late grandmother, Marjorie Nelson. I heard her tell me stories too, and tell the class, and it was all familiar to me, and how some of the older people would talk. And yeah, they often tell us. And I used to think about that. I heard that already. I don't want to say that though, but it must be important if they remind us and share that again, And I think that's something that in a very kind and gentle way and a loving way that they've shared that with us so that we can remember, and that's how important it is. And it's true that they our elders, they've experienced a lot of life. And at that point when they're at that age, and they also try, and I think that's where the story importance come to, they try to give us some lessons to hear from the story indirectly, but it's not saying, I just use this comparison, like growing up with older people in my life, it was very much like that kind of talk. And it seems to be common within Indigenous people. However, when you go to school, it's always a checklist. You don't do that, you do this, da 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 da. And it's very just I don't know how to say it, just that's it. But it doesn't allow creativity. You just, when you think about that, a lot of our people, when we go to school, or any people, it just, we pick up that pattern too. So then in a way we lose some of that, creativity and the ability to ask why, because I don't know about you, but I'd ask why in class sometimes, and then the teacher would ignore, and I just put my hand down. So that's kind of the society that I grew up in, at least here in Canada, right? So having that transition also is really important, right? And it's such a blessing, and to this day, and we'll share a little bit. So at this time, like I said, I read this story, and there's many stories I did read, but this one I pass on to my children, and significance. So remember, stories can be shared at that young age you talk about. And yeah, my children do fall asleep at a time, they do. But then here's the thing, they ask for it again if it's really good. And then as they get older, they remember. And the important part about this one that we'll share is that as they grow, they still hold on to it. And then they get to see some of the evidence of what our stories were, and evolution, not just us as humans, but as the earth at this time, in time has also grown, and creation. So what we share, there's a lot of truth in it, even though people may consider it, a children's story, but it's not really. It can be for all of our life, because I still think about it a lot nowadays, when we're out doing and being on the land. Those are things that just come to my mind when I see different animals and learn their story too. Not just our story, but also their story as part of creation. So There's one that we came across. This is about original man in Waboos. So if you don't know who Waboos is, and I know there's a couple Cree ladies here. So Waboos, you know, we're related. We're cousins for real. But at this time, you know, so this time, original man, who we know as Wanaboju, he walked the earth. And at this time, he was still by himself. So it must have been getting late. You know, he was relaxed and enjoyed, you know, summer is really nice. And he just, you know, it's a really nice, relaxing time, the heat, you know, and he was okay. But as this time endured, you know, it began to change. And so when Boju, being relaxed and maybe a little bit too relaxed, he kind of didn't take heed to what was going on. So then the season began to change. And so it was late summer. And then he realized, oh, you know, and there's where he got, so he got really hungry. And then he wondered, oh, what is it that he could do for food? He was getting to this point where he gets starving, you know, almost. And so he thought about what he could do. So what he did first, one of the things he did was go upon the earth, and he got up and he went and checked. You know, so he went to look for blueberries, you know, on the tree. But as he went there and he looked, you know, saw the bushes, it was there, and it was already too late. And he looked at all the bushes he could, but he didn't see anything. It was either dried up or it was gone or already eaten. So he was there. So you know, it was like he still got more hungry now, because his first attempt, there was nothing there. So he wondered, oh, what else could he do? So then he looked to, you know, around for the trees. And then, you know, there was an apple tree, and he looked at there, and he was still hungry. They're trying to kick it, you know, shake it, and there was nothing, you know. So even after that, he was still very, very hungry. And so then he's thinking, well, what else could I do? And so he fashioned up a spear, and he knew there was water close by, this river or creek. And so he made you know, like a spear, and he sat there and he waited like this, right? So he's sitting there waiting and waiting, but then he didn't see anything. So he kind of just, you know, left it. Then he went back, you know, kind of in the bush and sat, and he thought again, and he thought, what could he do? So then he began to ask, and he began to, you know, share a song, and he started to call out, you know, as he sang his song. So as he's sitting there hungry and singing his song, and, you know, in a way, then there's one animal that showed up and wondered what it is that he was doing. And so as that little animal showed up, just like, and he came close, then he was sitting there like that, kind of just singing this song. And then he realized, oh, there's someone there. And so what he did was, then he reached out to that one that came really close, and he grabbed it, and he held on to it like this. And so as he was holding it, what it was waboos, which is the rabbit. But at that time, the waboos looked different, not how it looks today. So back then, when waboos arrived to see Wanaboju and what it was that he was doing, is that it had 2 small ears and had 4 small feet. So what he did as he's holding on to it, he was so happy. Oh, I'm gonna eat. I'm good. But as he's holding it, then he realized, oh, like, then there's different animals that began to arrive. Then he saw the nika, which is the goose, you know, moose or wawash keshi, you know, the moose is a moose, just so you know, and the wawash keshi is the deer, you know, a benet, this is a bush chicken, you know, so he's seen all these other really tasty animals. And then what he did was his eyes got really big like this. And then he reached out, he tried to grab all of them. So as he reached out and he tried to grab them all, he ended up getting nothing. And so what happened to that waboose, as you seen what I did, it got away. So he's sitting there with nothing, and then he's hungry again, and then he's looking around, and of course, they all took off, eh? But then that waboose looked back, and then he looked at it, and then it looked different, because as when a Boju tried to grab all the other ones, and he had in his hands as he reached out, what he ended up doing is he stretched that waboose out. So by the ears got longer and the back 2 feet got longer. And so as he tried to reach and grab everything, he ended up with nothing. And so that's how we saw waboose when it took off and looked back at him. And so that's how we understand that why waboose looks the way he does today. So some stories like that are very, you know, for me, they're important. And I tell my boys that, you know, growing up. And so how is that relative to this day? And that's for you in your mind to think about, well, what lessons or teachings are in there, you know? And there's a lot in that, you know, and we could spend hours, you know, breaking it down and things like that, but inclusive of the language. But I mean, there's many lessons in that. And so as your child, which part do you think they remember the most out of the whole story? Yeah, the stretching, right? And it's funny, it's like, you know, it's okay. It doesn't have to be all that serious and sacred, you know, but it is to a degree. But it's also fun because the children, they remember that significant part. So for my children that have heard these growing up, as they get older, you know, they hear these stories, they see, and then we go hunting. We take them out hunting and snaring their first couple of times, and they see waboose. Guess what they say? They say, "Hey, Dad, remember what Lanape did to waboose?" You know, so they have a connection and evidence, truth of who they are, right? And so even too, when they begin to clean and put their hands on that work, they build that connection, you know? And so that's something that's truthful and of theirs, you know? And these are the stories, like one of our many stories, and like there's countless stories. Like I don't think there's anyone that knows all of them, but this is just one of them as an example, right? So to research that and to develop it and share that, the evidence of that is the children understand that. So if you could think about one lesson in that, what would that be for you? Right? As remember, there's different things in there, but as a child, they remember that. But what would be a lesson in there? You could guess. It's not a
For me, I remember the berries. So I like, it's always Anna that reminds us when it's time to go look for berries and gets us over. But so I've done that before as a berry picker, wanting to go out and get some berries and go and I'll do it next time. I'll do it next day. I'll do it next week. I'll go, I'm busy right now. And then I go and make time and they're all shriveled up.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, there's a teaching, it really sits with me as like, be ready, like you have to wait. Because I've also heard stories about the other way, like from my grandparents about them going to go look and they're not ready yet. So for us, it's not our time, it's the berries' time, and to be ready when they're ready.
Yeah. How about you, Sharitza, or Danielle, or Noah? That's exactly right. Oh, okay.
Okay, Noah. I think Noah's trying to unmute. Let's see. Oh, you got to do it again, Noah.
Can I be heard?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, Jason, I just want to say Chimigwash, that was an awesome story. And I'm totally going to think about it when I'm seeing Waboos next time. And but I guess I just was wondering if you would want to share anything about what it feels like now that you're the one that it's coming from, and it's like a different perspective from when you were learning. And I'm wondering kind of if you have any observations or comments to make on like now that you've got your kids looking up to you and your relatives and the whole community is and you get to see people listening to it and loving it and remembering it. If you just had any comments on it now that you're a passer on of it and what that's like.
Are you calling me old, Noah?
No.
I think and it's really interesting because that point of view, like again, is something I never expected, right? Like just something you don't plan for. We can't see the future all the time, right? Or I can't see it anytime, or else I had to hit the lotto max, right? But the thing is that it's interesting, it's satisfying, but it feels really good, like because again, like we're still deal with surviving in a city, this life, reconciliation, the disconnect in our family, these stories. So it feels good to be able to restore that for our children, that they have it. It's not going to be lost anymore, but they also have it in a way where it's meaningful for them and the rest of their life. So for that being restored to them, it builds them up with really good confidence, and so they have it. And the other thing with the story thing, I know we're kind of limited here, but I would be, it's typical that Anishinaabe and Indigenous tribes are really animate. So I'm lucky today. I don't have, I would have, sometimes they use the actual fur, in our camps and tell stories, you know what I mean? But this is a hat, so there's no head, because today's world, people are, I don't know, with, how we live, like it's normal to skin a rabbit, eat it, but some people or whatever about it. I don't worry about it. I just do what we're going to do anyway, because that's how we're given to do. But it's props, And so when we say that and we look, and then where we're really animated, and you'll see this lots. Oh, he went in the bush and he checked everywhere. They were everywhere, right? Checked the bush everywhere, and maybe saw those dried up berries like Donis, or nothing, And so we're animated in the story. So we're a part of that story, when we share it. And it's really good. And then like when I got up, it's hard for me to do it. So we're standing up, he's at the spear, and you got to envision that like for kids and what it's like. So there's lots of openings with it, right? But you have to be like engaging, with it and share that, in that way. Because yeah, it's cool to read. Like I can read, but it's much more animate that way. But what happens is my boys, they know it. And, Seni Sashig Carter, he's the one that really remembers that. Because what he said, Dad, you remember that? When Abuji went like this. Because he's cleans rabbits, he's young now, but he does it. But every time he's cleaning that rabbit, that story's there for him, So it's good that he has it, and he has a connection to our relatives, because yeah, they're animals, but they're still our relatives. And so he respects it, creation, what it does for us, that we appreciate, how they stood up for us. And still to this day, you know, they still provide for us, you know, whether it's fishing or hunting, you know, different things. And those animals that we named all provide for us. And they what do you call it? They give of themselves. They give of themselves so we can have life, you know. So hold on, I'll read a couple comments. Yeah, I can't see who's there, but it says we have comments that say being greedy, the animals who are always watching, yet we're never alone. Pay attention to your duties, looking after what needs to be done. So that's one comment. Yeah, it's very, very true. You know, like I said, I don't have to explain it. You're getting it. You know, and we all have that because it's so relatable, right? And for me, someone else commented, for me, I think don't be greedy is a lesson I get from many stories. Whiskey Jack and Nana Boju were greedy a lot. In almost every story I know, that's a lesson and I'm reminded of. Yeah. They're Dabwe or Debwe, or both. But that's exactly it, right? You know, for example, and break it down a little bit because we have a little bit of time, but I wouldn't do this for children or anyone, like you have your mind to make up, but exactly it. He knew of things, right? He was hungry. First thing, storytelling, there's a problem, right? We could break it down and, you know, how people do it. What's the problem? I used to hear that too. What's this problem? Just growing up. But besides that, the problem in this story was what? Rana Boju was hungry, right? And of course, he didn't, you know, fall into task and do things the way he should have been. So he was prepared for the upcoming time. So he did what he thought he should do, or what he would normally do at that time. Possibly the blueberries would be there, but he realized he waited too long just by, you know, like Donna said, being busy. You know, we get busy in life and whatever. Is that still applicable today? Yeah, I think so, right? And then he went to check. In this story, I just mentioned the tree, apple tree. Sometimes there wasn't there. So at that time wasn't there, you know. He tried, shake it, whatever, can't reach. He didn't have ladder and lifts and stuff like that. So, you know, there was nothing there. Next thing he tried was, you know, fashion a spear. Could have been a fish there and waiting, because remember at that time, waters were clear. You could see everything, but there was nothing in where he was. Like he tried, right? He tried some things that he did. The last thing he tried was, you know, and connected to that one comment was, you know, song is important, you know, and there's a song that I sing with the boys at that time, but he called out, you know, and his voice was heard by creation, you know, which is really interesting, you know, to hear that, to call out to creation where he was and knowing how he was suffering and, you know, to the degree and being so hungry. And then to have a response. And the first one to respond, of course, at the time was Waboos. So now, do you think a Waboos was the solution to his problem? His problem was he was hungry. Is a Waboos, or anyone that's ever ate a Wapoos, good enough to eat for a meal? Yeah, it was plenty enough, right? However, as he had enough in his hands, he had it. But then he looked around at everything else that was there and showed up. And then he tried to get everything. So that's where we hear that lesson too, is go guys, you can, like, don't be greedy, you know, but it's also appreciate, you know, what we have, you know, and the answer. And so in life, we have that and we live that. Sometimes we ask for help and, you know, maybe we don't want that answer, but we're answered, you know. So it's a lot of sometimes about our faith and belief and our teachings in that way. So I might not have, you know, $1 million or something, but I'm healthy, I have a good life, I have food, a place to stay, you know. So I mean, looking at what we do have is also really, really important, you know, which is kind of different from mainstream society, you know. And so it can go into different levels of our life when we are in different places in our life, you know, but getting our people or our children to remember it's still that humor. Because y'all want to be the best joke tellers and storytellers, so having that good part. And so we're so thankful that you know, Whiskey Jack and Wano Boju, Original Man, and different animals too have comical stories. You know, it's part of who we are, you know, and I think that's really, really important. And you know, the other thing that happens is kids, well, what happened after? Did he eat? Well, yeah, but that's another story. And, you know, stuff like that, you know, so you kind of don't explain it to children like this way, but the key is that. And what does that do? So we already have, even in the comments of different people, a different interpretation and meaning to them, right? And how fulfilling it is to see that. So, you know, one day, who knows, you know, we'll be older and, you know, still holding the same story and remember that, you know. And that's what, you know, the younger kids say, you know, nowadays. Like, well, my kids, I guess you could say, because mostly they hear it, you know. But I'm glad they actually listen. So I have to turn off all the electronics, right? And, you know, it takes time to get them in that space to be there, you know. And that's something we all have to do, I think, as humans, to get away from the phones and the internet and just unplug, to be present, you know, which is really, really critical, you know, and difficult even in these times. But when you can get to that place, you know, our minds are settled, can be so powerful where we can retain so much, you know. And I think it's it's amazing to me. So I like hearing stories, you know. Some are longer than others, which are really good too. But I notice as I get older, my attention span is shorter.
I know too, we have messages on here. Donna was talking about the lessons in the story are being greedy. And Danae says that it makes me think of all those animals who came to watch that were never alone. And also Donna was saying that we're not paying attention to our duties, not looking after things that need to be done. Just what you said too is like how that shapes our children to be able to think about those stories and to think, you know, a lot of times Bojo is hungry. In almost every story, Bojo is hungry. But you know, it's like thinking about what is necessary for life, what's important for life, who do we depend on for life. So it's like we're always thinking that, like, who do we depend on? And instead of going to the grocery store, it's like these are the ones we depend on. And I think in modern society, we're so disconnected from that it's like being able to say, oh, yes, this is where our life comes from. It comes from the plants. It comes from, and they have names and they have relationships with us and they have memories of Bojo. And they have, you know, and we can learn. So we can learn from that, and being able to make that's a central part of life. That's a central part of giving thanks. That's a central part of what life means. So when we're reminded of that, we even look at our food that we have in front of us. Where did it come from? Where did this food come from? You know, who gave their life, you know, for us to live? And so overall, you feel richer instead of looking out at what you don't have and all the things you don't have, which I think, I don't know, for me in this society, a lot of it is about, you know, a focus on what we don't have. And the stories of Wewena Bojo and of Wasagi Jack, they often tell us like, oh, look at all these things we have, you know. And so being able to see that in ourselves, like I noticed I'm in a lot of those classes you're in where they're like, tell me the answer, you know, but don't ask a question. Just only tell me my answer, what you want me to say, and there's a right answer. But when I hear storytellers in our communities, they don't give you an answer. And if you ask them, I know I've been answered. You know, I was lucky, like my family, like they answer me when I ask questions. And, you know, there was never anything wrong with asking questions, you know, the way that it was in school. So I could ask a question, they give me an answer and it was really long. And I was like, what does that have to do with my question? And inside my head, I'd be like, if you didn't want to answer me, you could have just said so or something. And I'd walk away. This is my younger self. And then I'm like, it took me like 2, 3, 4 years to figure out all of the references that they were making and all of the connections and the stories that they were drawing on, to realize they were answering me directly. But I had to make those connections. They wouldn't make them for me. I had to put the work in to learn and to share. So I don't know, for me, I really like the story. I really like your reflections. I really like the questions and the opportunity to get us to think, because a lot of our stories are in the children's section, but that doesn't mean that there isn't lots for us to learn as adults.
Yeah, it's always, it's always ongoing. We reflect back and we look at it differently, like we were saying earlier. But it also gives incentive to next time, because that's the other thing that happens is, well, what do Wanaboshu do next? To be continued. But it explores that the whole thing, right? Like you're naming these animals, the stories is a much bigger story. And then we talk about creation, and how is that connected to our creation story, and then what are those relationships are. And it's even beyond like the physical realm we live in, but also idea Nangu Kaning and the spirit realm or the star world. And we see evidence of our relatives up there, you know. And so that connection and the truth of who we are and how original man came here is more significant. So I was like, oh, and that's where we would say like it's such a blessing, I would say, to be able to hold that and hold on to that and keep it, you know. But to maintain that, where we're seeking back is back to the original, you know, who give us life, is that kindness from the spirit, who loved all his children and creation so much that we have a lot, you know. But again, and it furthers to who we are as Indigenous people, this part of the world, why we try to maintain that relationship, and it goes to food sovereignty and land sovereignty, you know, and protecting, and you know, I don't think we're alone in that. I mean, there are some foundations of people, you know, who want to stand up for animals, but how we treat the earth is really significant, because we still have a responsibility to do what we can in that. And we talk about food processing. Our people lived by these animals, and the truth is you know, how we heard is Ingamina ini Jonas Nanak and Shinabik ni al Mionje Deminopamad is like when the spirit asked how our children would live, meaning the Anishinaabe, is that stood up was the animals, and said, I will give them my entire being of myself, that they will have good life, you know. And it still remains true to this day if we looked at our diets and what we had back then, you know, whether it was goose soup or deer or waboos, rabbit, manoman, wild rice, odemanan, like all the berries, baganake, like all the different nuts. Well, we look at that. But again, even though we might have those things and those things are here, I'm sorry, it's not like Skip the Dishes where you can order it. You have to go out and earn that and be on time. Right, Donis?
Yeah. I'm still learning.
But again, and that's where we go, and sometimes we can't. And so part of the give back is, as we're able to do these things out of respect, you know, when people, and I just want to share this last part though, is that out of respect, when we take these things, or they show up, you know, from the land, we extend that to our uncles and aunties, or what we would call our elders, because often, you know, to me it seems, and it's true, they're the ones that taught us things and showed us things and how to do things and how to provide for ourselves. So when we extend that back to them, without, you know, I don't have strings, no money attached, just, you know, share with them. And that's about respect and appreciating that we're shown a way to look after ourselves. So in a good way, whenever we can do that, we try to do that, you know, and if they request, then we do our best to answer that, you know, as much as we can, as we're physically able to do these things, because sometimes, again, people cannot do these things or don't know, so we still share with as much as we can. So that's as much I wanted to kind of share with today. I hope people enjoyed it to a degree, you know, whatever it is, but good reminders. And I'd encourage people to keep researching, try to learn some of these stories. And, you know, there's lots, and like in this library, you know, I don't want to look through too much because I'll end up reading lots because I really enjoy it. But it's such a good resource there. And if we have opportunities like this and in our communities throughout the year, because not all stories are shared during the winter, but, you know, some of them are kind of specific to that, you know. But I encourage people to try and reclaim that or reconnect that, hold it the best you can, carry it, and then of course, pass it on to our children, because these are our stories. You know, we might not have many authors in our communities, but boy, we got some really good storytellers. Oh, you know. So I just wanted to share that, acknowledge everyone here and say thank you. Thank you for listening today. And that's as much time we have until next time.